I want us today to pray for the poor, to pray for those who are most affected by the lockdown here in the United Kingdom and of course around the world, particularly the developing world. This is a theme we've returned to again and again during these series of vlogs, but a very, very important one. Now, there are lots of arguments about coronavirus, what it is, how infectious it is, what the exact rate of fatalities are, what the lockdown has or hasn't accomplished. And you wouldn't know there was much of an argument about some of these things if you just relied on the media, but trust me, vast diversity of opinion among medics, scientists, political commentators, etc., etc. Now, in the New Testament, in the early church, they had their fair share of discussions about this, that and the other. How's it going to work out? What should we do about the law? Is it incumbent on these new Christians to obey the law or not? Paul and Peter had their disagreements about it. And some of the New Testament is written to address those challenges. The Acts of the Apostles records the Council of Jerusalem thinking about some of the challenges posed to them by people like Paul and his ministry to the Gentiles. Paul reflects on that actually in his book to the Galatians, and there's one verse I'd like to read to you this morning that flows out of the disagreements and the challenges and the debates and ends up with this single priority. It's quite a surprise. The verse almost comes out of the blue in Galatians chapter 2 and verse 10. Let me read it to you. All they, that's the Council of Jerusalem, the Jerusalem-based leadership of the church, all they asked was that we continue to remember the poor, the very thing I was eager to do. So there was a debate about how the law was to apply to new Christians and all that stuff, and it was relatively amicably resolved with this proviso: don't forget, be aware of the needs of the poor. And Paul says, of course, I really wanted to do that. I thought of that as a priority too. And if it was a priority for the New Testament church, how much should it be a priority for us? So to remind us all, the greatest pain of this situation is not the pain of the virus, it's the pain of the lockdown. It's already causing starvation on a grand scale. The World Bank announced this week that the lockdown associated with corona is likely to drive a further 60 million people into absolute poverty. And I don't think of those as just numbers. Think of those as hungry babies and children, starving to death, much more prone to disease. Malnutrition is a dreadful killer on its own, but allied to other conditions is fatal for many. Don't forget that when unemployment takes off in the West, as it surely will for some in the months to come as the summer leads into the autumn here in the Northern Hemisphere, the jobs which will be lost will be disproportionately jobs done by poorer people, those without tertiary level education, those people who are doing arguably more mundane jobs. They're likely to be the people who will lose their jobs and therefore become poorer still. And we know the link between economic wealth and physical health issues. And so the poor become poorer still. And we also know that given the challenges for the health service, which desperately needs to open up, of course, to everyone, we know that if you can't get the health you need through the National Health Service and you're poor, you've got nowhere to go. If you have resources, then there are a range of ways of buying in private health care. But if you're poorer, you won't have those resources to draw on. And so in every way, this situation affects poorer people more dramatically than richer people. Poorer people tend to have less outdoor space. They tend to be more confined, less access to the resources which breed health and strength. We know how expensive it is to eat in a healthy way. Those studies have been numerous around the world. So today, just like Paul, in the middle of all the debate and the cut and thrust of lifting lockdown, not lifting lockdown, how we should be behaving, the scientific views, very different from one another, remember the poor. Remember to pray. Remember to target financial giving so that the poor around you can have their needs alleviated, and the desperately poor around the world can know that they're still remembered and cared for. And pray too for governments as they deal with this, to always bear in mind the implications for the poorest in society of the decisions they make.